Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to almost 50% of first marriages. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Divorce Happens, a podcast to educate, inspire, support, and yes, make you laugh through divorce and beyond so that you can start fresh on the next phase of your journey. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh.
You get divorced. You get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce.
You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, and a little bit of laughter, because as we know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. And we're here with somebody very special today, who is somebody that is we've connected. It's been a long time now. I feel like a couple years since we both were kind of getting our businesses off the ground. And now we're moving and shaking and busy women. And I actually know I'm going to say this. I connected with you because of your divorce. I read the piece you wrote for, oh gosh, what was that, about divorce in North Carolina a long time ago?
Oh my God, Time Magazine.
Time Magazine,
that
right.
one? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, who is this girl? I need to reach out to her. And we both have a deep love of Muppets, as is on her mug today, and our Jewish families, and we're just
divorce.
Yeah,
Studio, so.
lots of good stuff. So I'm gonna, without further ado, I'm gonna let this bright spirit introduce herself. Who are you, Rebecca?
Oh, thanks, Olivia. It's so good to see you, friend. I'm Rebecca Feinglos. I am the founder of Grieve, which is an organization that is focused on grief and loss and educating people on those topics and supporting them through all different kinds of losses, which, as you know as well as I do, when most people hear the word grief, they think automatically about death. But the beautiful thing about Grieve and the work that we do is we talk about non-death related grief too, like the grief that we feel when a relationship ends, and particularly when a marriage ends. And as I am someone who lost both of my parents by the time I was 30 and then went through a divorce, I can personally attest to the fact that there is grief in all of it. And no grief is necessarily like worse nor better. It just is.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to be here with you, Olivia. And I love talking about all things divorce and helping people.
Absolutely. And I think that what you said was so profound, because there is the thing with grief is that it doesn't go away ever, right? It just kind of rolls into who you are. And the same thing with divorce grief. I mean, as anybody that listens to this show knows, I am so happily divorced. And yet, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, there's still some times that I'm like, wow, I went through that. That was hard. That was shitty. That was not the way I expected my life, right? So with that being said, what are the 3 things that you learned from your divorce that you would share with people who are going through this?
I think the first thing that I would say before anything else is that you are not stuck. And I feel like for so long in my life, I felt like I was very stuck on a track. I was stuck on this pathway that I thought I wanted to be on that included this beautiful marriage that I opted into quite young in retrospect. But I felt very stuck. I felt like, well, I chose to be in this marriage. I think the sunk cost fallacy comes into play here. Like, I've invested so much already. I've invested my time. I've invested, I was going to say dollars, but I mean, I guess that is true. I've invested money in this relationship. We live together, whatever it is. And so I felt very stuck. And it took me years, many years to realize, like, okay, you're unhappy. You know that things are not getting better in the ways that you thought they might. You're working really hard, both of you are, and you can get out. Like, you don't have to stay in this situation. You are not stuck. And I don't think I realized that until both of my parents had died when I was 30. And it was at age 31 that I decided to separate from my ex.
I have a question for you. Did your parents know him?
Yeah. So my mom died when I was very young, so
Right.
she did not. Um, here's what's really interesting. So my late father, his name was Mark, Dr. Feinglos.
Mhm.
Dad was amazing. And I think things were kind of starting to crumble from this facade I had put up, that everything was going great in my relationship. And I was like perfect daughter,
Yeah.
achiever, all of that. In around 2018, things really started to crumble in my marriage. And
Mm.
I let my dad in to know a little bit more about what was going on. And he was extremely concerned.
Mm.
And I think his support of me was
Yeah.
incredibly helpful at the end. And then when he died, I think some of the conversations that I had with my therapist or even with my friends was, would your dad support you in ending the marriage? And immediately my thought was, yes, of course he would. Like, I think I just was so worried about not causing problems for him. And we had been through so much in my family already. And I just wanted to be a good daughter. And I just wanted something to go like, quote unquote, right in my life. And when he died, Olivia, I was like, well, fuck. Like nothing is going to turn out the way that I thought it was in
Right.
my life. He's
Right.
not going to be a grandparent. My mom died long ago.
Mhm.
This isn't playing out the way that I thought. So let me
Right.
break out of this cycle
Right.
that I felt like I was stuck in
Blow
for
it up.
so long.
Right. Yeah. Because I've encountered a lot of people our generation, our age, who have, let's say they met somebody and then their parents met that, they were in the picture and then maybe their parents passed away and then they ended up marrying the person and they thought, well, shit, I can't get divorced. This person met my father, right? And it gives me chills to think about it because I know a lot of people stuck in these relationships for years and years that are basically in them to serve a dead parent's wishes, right? That
Mm.
they think, right? And so I think that what you did is I'm so glad you let your dad in to what was going on, so you never had to question that. And obviously, like your parents, want you to be happy, but I would imagine having lost your mom and then having lost your dad, there must have been a piece of you that was like, well, but this is kind of holding on to my old life with like them, right? And kind of
100%.
confounding the things.
It was weird to start dating again because I just kept having this realization over and over and over again as I was dating post-divorce. Like, wow, none of these people are ever going
Yeah.
to meet my father. None of them will. And it's giving me chills just thinking about how upsetting that was at the
Yeah.
beginning. That this like core person in my life, like my moral compass, my dad was my best friend in the world. We
Mhm.
talked every day. And how am I supposed to build a deep relationship with someone who can never know me on that level, which was having known my father? And what I've learned over time is that, man, I have a wonderful boyfriend now, and him and the men that I dated before, everyone's gotten to know my father through
Yeah.
me, right? Like I
Mhm.
carry him with me. I carry my mom with me. They get to know who they are through the stories that I tell, who they were,
Mhm.
through the stories that I tell, through the person that I am. And so they still learn about him, but that is up to me to be vulnerable enough to share. But damn, it's weird. It's so weird. Like I
Yeah.
have to think about that sometimes. I'm like, oh, right, you never met my dad. That's weird.
But it would be the same if you have children, right? You have to share your parents. I mean, I feel the same way with my grandmother, who was my person in the world, and she loved my ex-husband, right? And then she didn't know that we broke up, and I'm like, well, now she knows because she helped me through that from heaven, but wherever she is. But like I think, we talk about these people. My grandfather who passed away before when I was 18, and I'm like, well, my kids know all about him because we have to share, but it does take a vulnerability. And I do think a lot of people are not willing to go there. So I appreciate you being vulnerable because I think this is a topic we don't talk about is getting kind of stuck, quote unquote, in a marriage because of a parent's wishes or that you think that they want you there. And I mean, I know about your dad because you share him beautifully, right? Like we all know about Mark because you share pictures and stories and your brother and your nephew, right? You have a new nephew, right?
That's
And so
exactly
there's
right.
like, yes, there's so much that you are so open, but that's your energy, right? That's the beautiful part about you. And like I've known because of, I'm a friend of yours, like not everybody's willing to do that because they haven't walked through the path of grief.
You know what you're making me think about is like, I think you sort of hinted at this a few minutes ago. Like, I'm very lucky that I let my dad in
Yeah.
to know that things were really, really not going well
Yeah.
toward the end of my relationship. And like, I can play out pretty damn well what I think my dad would have thought about me getting divorced. And I think he would have supported me. I have to imagine, and I have talked with many people who are facing this, like that their deceased person remains their anchor.
Yeah.
And it can almost become an excuse for not leaving your marriage, that ending the marriage means disconnecting from this one other person who knew your person. And if you disconnect, if you opt out of a relationship, like what's left connecting you to your person who died?
100%. Like, I love the way you put that. And I think that is true for so many people. When my grandmother passed away she passed away in 2017. My marriage broke up in 2019. So it was close enough. What was super interesting was that she was very affectionate with me, and I'm not like an affectionate person. When she died and I realized I hadn't been hugged or touched in a long time and I was married, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, right? And so sometimes their deaths can really, illuminate a lot of things that are happening. And I also know, like, Jenny talks about this, like when when she called off her engagement, she was like, well, I'm blowing up my life anyway. What else can I do? Right. And so it's like,
That
my dad
resonates.
died, my mom's dead. Who the fuck cares? I'm going to do whatever I want. And so I love that. So
Truly.
I could talk about this with you forever because I think, we don't talk enough about grief, which is why you do what you do. So I love that. Okay. So that's a huge piece. And we love Mark for.
You are so wonderful. And thank you for remembering my family and knowing my dad's name and remembering my brother and remembering my nephew. Like, that means a lot to me, Olivia. So thank you for even
of course.
Giving me space to talk about them.
We're all connected. Okay. So what's the second thing that you learned from your divorce?
So, okay, this is, I need like a snappier way to say this that doesn't sound so awful, but maybe it's just awful. You don't have to get yelled at all the time.
Who knew?
Like, we normalize things in relationships because we think that they are the price we pay for love. And we normalize experiences that really aren't great because, I don't know, it's the narrative we tell ourselves. Like, well, marriage is hard. Love is hard. Communication's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I normalized a lot of appalling behavior. Yelling, verbal abuse, awful things that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And it was just the water I was swimming in and the air I was breathing in for, basically our entire relationship. We were married for over 5 years and together for about 5 years before that. And my key takeaway from all of that is like, it just doesn't have to be that way. And anytime I talk to anybody who is in a relationship that they don't love, it is one of the first things I say to them, Olivia. Like, you don't have to get yelled at all the time. Like, you actually just don't have. I can't remember the last time a man or anyone yelled at me. And that was not true in my marriage. That was like just a constant. Like, there was a lot of escalation constantly. But human beings, right? Like, we want to persevere through tough times and we normalize things. It doesn't have to be that way.
I just read something about abuse, and specifically I want to say with emotional and verbal and psychological abuse, that the thing that's most misunderstood about it is that it's good 50% of the time. The relationship is great 50% of the time. If it wasn't great 50% of the time, then you would leave, right? So the abusers do that on purpose. Not the going from walking on eggshells all the time to not walking on eggshells all the time is completely, it's like, talk about grief, right? It's like, you didn't even know people could live that way. I was just going to post, I was laughing while you were talking. We like to say we're workshopping tweets, although we don't really tweet anymore, but I was workshopping a thread the other day about the fact that, like, if your husband's on the couch scrolling Instagram models over and over, that's not really a great thing. Sorry. No. but I justified it. Oh, he's just stressed. It's okay. He's just going to look at other women online. No, it's not for my marriage. And so,
Frustrating.
we justify because especially empaths, right? Especially compassionate people who are healers, natural born healers, right? Because you're like, no, it's okay. It's fine. Just yell at me.
There was always a reason. There's
Right,
always like,
right.
oh, he's stressed about this
Yep.
thing, or he's stressed about that thing, or this thing is going
Yep.
on in our lives. Like, of course, he's, we're in graduate school, or we have this medical issue going on, or this external stressor. And at some point, again, it really just took like the deaths of both of my parents for me to be like, man, there's never not going to be stress.
Right.
Like I can make excuses for
Right.
bad behavior
Right.
over and over and over again.
Right.
And same for me. I could make excuses for my own behavior.
Yeah.
And that's not the person I want to be either.
Yeah. 100%.
So it was life-changing. And I remember like one of the very last moments, like the final straw. And we plan divorces in our mind and we weigh the pros and cons for years.
Mm-hmm.
One of the last moments is I remember that my ex had left town for a family thing. And I remember coming home for the first time that day or while he was gone. And I remember the peace that I felt coming into my own home, being like, I'm not worried that someone's upset with me. I'm not worried about walking into my own home and not knowing what mood I'm walking into.
Yeah.
And it was at that point that I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I am happier. I am more peaceful without his presence here.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to say it's like seeing through the veil. Like you can see a different life happening before your eyes and you're like, how do I get that life, right? Often it is releasing the other person, so I love that. Okay, what's the third big thing you learned from your divorce? After you take a Muppet sip.
After I take a Muppet sip. Okay. Something that I used to say often in my head is if I just keep working harder, things are going to get better. And that it's about me. It's about like my own inadequacies that are preventing the relationship from growing and getting to the point where, for me specifically, I wanted it to feel safe enough for kids.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to have kids and I didn't feel like it was safe enough to bring them into this world.
Yeah.
Which is an awful thing to say out loud, but is so true. And I think at some point I learned, actually, no matter how hard we work, because both of us were working incredibly hard. Both of us were in therapy, couples counseling, you name it. At some point, it hit me that things aren't going to get better enough. And that doesn't mean things didn't improve.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we didn't get better at communicating, but they weren't better enough.
Right.
And I needed to come to terms with that had nothing to do with how much we loved each other.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with how hard we were trying. We were just not the right fit.
Yeah.
I think that's huge for people. I think this is true of men and women. We are taught that, particularly as Americans, that we can work our way out of any problem.
Mm-hmm.
That if we just change this one little thing, then everything will get better. We can pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and solve whatever it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just not true. And it doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means y'all are not the right fit for each other.
No, and you met young, right? I think that there's something to be said. We're not the same person we are at 23 than we are at 33 and 43. We're just not. And that's okay. I mean, I have this theory that I'm playing with. I'm sure people will disagree with me, that the person that you have kids with may not be the person you raised the kids with.
Totally.
And I see this happening all the time. And there's a beauty in, like, for me, like, I already have my kids. I get to pick a partner now that works for all of us. Right. And, and that happens a lot. Right. So I just appreciate all of that because, you chose yourself and that's really hard to do. And there is a big grieving process there. But you can see
Totally.
your life is obviously aligned with where it's supposed to be. And it would never have been that way.
No, I feel like the most myself I have ever
Yeah.
felt in
And
my
you can tell.
entire
I mean,
life.
that's what your energy gives off, right? Like that's why the work you do makes an impact. And that's why the people come into your circle, because you decided to go through those circles of hell. And, it wasn't easy. I mean, I talk a lot about how manifestation isn't always like, bring me the money, bring me the good stuff. It's like, I need to be aligned with my higher path. And that could mean losing everything sometimes.
I also think that, again, the deaths of my parents made me ask myself, who am I?
Yeah.
Like, who am I at my core?
Right.
If there is no one else externally who is like holding these anchors of morality for me and these anchors of like who our family is. So it's me now, right? And so that made me question like alignment to my sense of self in my marriage. It made me question that in my job. At the end of the day, like I needed to work harder to become more aligned with who I was and who I am. And that meant letting go of what did not actually align anymore with me.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask this, and I don't know how to say this without being crass, but like, is there a freedom that comes with not having your parents around, like to pick somebody?
Dude, yes. And that is it's so funny. I say this all the time, Olivia. And I'm like, well, I can write pretty much whatever I want and talk about pretty much whatever I want and date whoever I want because I have no one left to disappoint. That's what like, there's no one who's going to be disappointed. I mean, my brother, his opinions matter to me so much. And we're the torchbearers for the other. I love my sister-in-law and I don't know that he would have married her if we couldn't get along because I am the only family member, on his side and vice versa, him for me. And I love her so much. She's the perfect partner for him. And we're so close. It's the same idea that like, okay, I don't have to check in with anybody. I think about my parents all the time.
Yeah, of course.
I think about what they might think about a given situation and who they might like that I've dated. I know they would both love my boyfriend right now. I have no doubt about that. In my mind, I can like imagine them in space together. Probably like watching a basketball game because it's March Madness. It's the time of year. But I feel so much more freedom to just be. There's no more pressure. It's awful. That is an awful, like brutal freedom. It's very bittersweet.
That's why
I think your question is spot on.
I was wondering that because I mean, especially coming from a Jewish family, there's a lot of pressure. I know other families are like this too, right? And so, getting married young. Our friend Matt Gallahuli he has the podcast, the Life Shift podcast, and he always calls it the checkbox life, right? It's like check. I did the same thing, right? Marriage. I married a half Jewish guy, had the 2 kids, the house in suburbia, and then now I'm like the CEO, bootstrapped, living back home, trying to figure it out, right? And so, I think that goes back to the duality of life, right? You can both grieve your parents every moment of every day and be so pissed that they're not here and feel like I'm fucking free to go sleep with whoever I want to sleep with. Nobody needs to tell me what to do.
It's pretty awesome. Like I also like, I think about what dating in my 30s has been like. And honestly, like how much fun it's been to just learn about myself and learn about who I am and what I like and what I don't like. And that I never got to do that before. I mean, college dating was totally different. I met my ex-husband at 22, out of college. And so suddenly I was 31 and single and learning what dating apps were. And I loved it. Yeah. Some days were really fucking lonely and the apps can be, I don't know, bad for your mental health. But I loved getting to know myself in this way of like, again, it comes back to alignment, like figuring out who aligns with me, and that's not that anyone that I didn't like when I went out with, they're not bad. Maybe we're just not aligned.
And you carry that alignment of your parents with you, right? And so whoever is going to align with you is also naturally going to align with them.
100%. Like when my boyfriend met my brother and my sister-in-law, like it felt like we had met before. Like it just felt very familiar.
And that's true probably for friends you bring into your life, for business, for anything. Yeah. 100%. I love that. I just love everything you're saying. So before we let you go, can you just tell us if somebody's listening to this and they're going through a divorce, what would be some words of encouragement that you could leave them with?
You know what I'm thinking about? Our timing is perfect right now because I had a conversation with someone I really care about this morning who is really weighing whether she wants to stay in her marriage. And the question that I asked her was, when you get really quiet, really, really quiet, like you go sit in the woods somewhere, what does your gut tell you? Does your gut tell you to stay or does your gut tell you to go? Trust your gut instinct. Your gut already knows what is best for you, what is safest. Like you have the answers you need already. You have them right now in you.
Yeah.
You just have to get quiet enough to actually hear it. Trust yourself. That is my biggest advice.
I love that. I love that. Where can people find you to follow along with all of your great stuff?
Oh my gosh, all over the internet. You can go to grieveleave.com. That's GrieveLeave.com. We're also on Instagram at grieveleave, and on TikTok and on Facebook. And you can find my personal stuff there too, but it's mostly Duke basketball right now because of March Madness.
I was going to say
if you
Duke,
like
yeah.
that, you can follow me too.
And you have a beautiful podcast.
We have the Griefed Up podcast. Thank you for mentioning it and for saying such kind words about it. I can't remember if we were recording yet when you were complimenting the Griefed Up podcast.
I don't
you said
remember,
very nice things about it.
It's a great podcast.
And I so appreciate you.
You're a wonderful host. Yeah. No, it's one of my favorites to listen to.
You're the best. We are going to kick off season 2 a little bit later this year, but season 1 is all up, including a good place to start if you haven't listened is our final episode of season 1 is a big summary episode of my 5 biggest aha moments from throughout the season and the interviews that we had with people, ranging from basketball players to, I mean, you name it, other celebrities. So it was amazing. I
appreciate you talking about grief like so much because it is part of our everyday life and we just try to ignore it and we can't ignore it anymore. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you for being you and for everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, everyone. Divorce Happens is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the only divorce registry platform for everything you need to begin again, including home items, hype team, and everything in between. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh. We're here to support you before, during, and after divorce. Head to freshstartsregistry.com for more info.